Hey, hello! I'm really excited. I genuinely am excited, which is nice. Welcome to whatever edition of the S.H.O.P, the social hub of positivity that this is. Each week we have wonderful people from the community, from far and wide. This particular individual we've had on before, back in the day when Mark Smith from the council asked me to do a series of interviews for prospective councillors, wasn't it? Back in the day. But since then, lots of things have happened, and you've had many adventures. Some of which I have to say, I personally would like to, from someone who's worked in the sustainable development sort of arena for 24 years now, and who obviously understands the peril, absolute peril that we are in. I wanted to say thank you on behalf of Can Do Arts for Sustainable Development, Ed Deedigan as local annoyance to the local council and National Council and International Council, but also for my children, because the sort of things you've been up to, people need to cop on board, yes. and get on board with. Hello, sir. Adrian Temple Brown, by the way, everyone.
Hello again, Ed.
Lovely to see you.
Yeah, nice to be back, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, well, funny we still got this shop. It was supposed to be, the thing being is we're doing it as part of the community initiative. So, as you're well aware, lots of people have come out of hiding from lockdown with a lot of mental health problems. So this has been a real useful on many levels, and we work with Harness to Reach. So it's been a fantastic help Emery Gate have given us and the society. What have you been up to?
Well, I come in here from time to time, and I'm glad to see you're still busy. There's loads of people out there today, and there's lots of art on the walls as well, which is nice to see. Very
changed it since the first interview. If you were to look, there's literally over 1,000 different individual pieces, because we've worked with loads of different young people and organisations. April Barlow did the bio tapestry, which is the thing that goes right around, and each one of them is an individual art. We did it with the museum as well. There's literally thousands of people, so it's evolved naturally, organically, and without any public money.
And you can talk to the artists as well. So usually there's people sitting around either painting or drawing.
I love it. So today we've got 3 of the artists in. Yeah. They help run it. I mean, they're not just as gifted as they are. They help run the place, and we are open 7 days a week. Think about that. And then we have been since the start of opening up, which was, I think, was the 12th of April. We were prepping this place well before that, but we couldn't open the doors. In fact, I think we might have done those interviews in a time when it was still lockdown.
It was kind of, I think it was May the elections were, weren't they? May this year. So it was,
May.
We were all tentatively coming out.
Yeah.
But it's good to see that it's still here, and it's more vibrant than it was then.
Yes, absolutely. It's proved itself, and that's why we want to get involved at the Neild Hall with a consortium of people to help run it properly, really, as a community initiative, and the cafe at the back. We just need to sort of, I guess, cut away the dead wood from the council, and then off we jolly well trot, which obviously we have to do because we live here.
So I guess, last time I came, I stood for election both on town and county level. Yeah. Basically standing completely on a climate action agenda. Yeah. So there's no nicey stuff about the community stuff that you look after. It was purely, we need policies to sequestrate carbon,
you were right as well,
cut down carbon, and those sort of things. And I think I didn't stand in my own ward because another environmentally aware chap stood in my ward as an independent, and I went across to the Sheldon ward, which was a 10 minutes walk. And thoroughly enjoyed walking around it. And my views of Sheldon were completely changed, having visited every door 2 times.
Yeah, fair play.
Had lots of nice conversations with people, but I think I should have majored on actually talking to people on the doorstep, which I only started doing at the back end of the last week, as opposed to flyering and putting out A5 flyers on the other things that are going on in the community as well to do with climate. Yeah. So I got about 8% of the vote, which I thought was a reasonable poll of how climate aware people are in general. Yeah. Because I've been quite involved in climate stuff, both sort of activism with Extinction Rebellion a little bit, and also research, reading around how big the problem is with the climate, learning about how big the problems are with the environment as well, the ecology, trying to size up what it would take to fix some of those problems, particularly the atmospheric carbon problem. Work out how big it is, work out if we were to fix that with engineering, how much of something that you need in order to fix it. And I ended up focusing a little bit on COP26.
Yeah.
Because essentially when you work out the numbers, you realise that it's such a big problem that everybody around the world has to understand there's a huge problem. And then we kind of have to change our focus as humanity away from making money.
Consumerism for sake of it. Yeah.
That's like making money in any way. Consumerism is just one way that.
Oh yeah, I know, but absolutely.
Made,
so a part of as a consumer, that's how people can change. Yeah. People say, well, what can I do about it? So, well, you could go on a plant-based diet, for instance. It's a sacrifice. What? Which would you rather? And this is the bit that people don't get, isn't it? It's the human race that won't survive. The Earth will survive as long as the other atmospheric conditions remain, i.e. the sun keeps shining, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have a sentimentality of human beings. In fact, if it had its own way of protecting itself from parasites, it would destroy us itself because we're dum-dums. Carry on, sir.
Yeah, effectively, it's such a big problem that we kind of, as humanity, need to realise that unless we all group together or get together and focus on the problem of having a future, we won't have a future. Yeah. And so for me, I think COP...
That's education.
Yeah, well, education across the board.
Across the board, social not in the struggling schools, not because they want to struggle, there's brilliant teachers, but with the limited resources that they've got. That's why we've been doing loads of different types of engagement around the environment and around social equity and resource distribution around the country as well as around the world. Carry on.
I think it's as much an adult education that's
education. I mean everyone.
Yeah. So right now, today, we need the leaders to educate themselves. Yeah. At the global level, the national leaders. Yeah. And we particularly need.
Have you seen who they might be?
Well, you can see them in the Lords and you can see them in Parliament, you know. So all of those people in the Lords and in Parliament. And
Sorry for laughing. It's you know what I mean? It's like a dark. You know, the areas that we work in society. When I see these leaders, as we laughingly call them, or what are they? Elites. I don't see them as elites.
They're the ones
oligarchs.
They're the ones we can't see.
Yeah. Oh, of course, but you know, they come through those same schools, don't they? Your Rees Moggs of this world, and bless him, poor old Boris, poor old abandoned, possibly got attachment issues. Boris, and his father is doing him great turn there, isn't he? Watch out! Here comes the Borises.
We do see them, but it's not an issue of education over the next child 5-10 years as they come into life. I mean, the leadership needs to be educated now.
Yeah.
And they need to be educated on the crises that we have today, the climate and the ecological crisis. And so that's the key thing, I think. And I think when you educate yourself about how bad things are, because you understand what's coming next, you're then naturally proactive to change your view to away from wealth and security in your life and for your fellow humans. Towards a future, having a future for yourself and for your fellow humans as well. And to achieve that, one of the best way to achieve that is through government policy or national policy.
Legislation, absolutely.
Which can be legislation, but basically you can actually stand up and tell people that there's a major problem, like we did in the COVID. You know, you stand up again and again and again.
Too late.
Weeks and months.
Too little, too late. We are talking the same dingbats that couldn't save thousands of people dying. Carry on.
There's a really huge problem, and unless you do roughly these things then you've got a reasonable chance of dying. So you ought to do it. And when you explain the problem of climate change and the ecological crisis to people in a way that's clear and concise and comes through our main media channels and it comes from our government leaders on a regular daily or weekly basis, then you have a chance of educating the other 92% of society that didn't vote for climate action at the ground level that there really is a problem. And when most people can understand that, then we stand a chance of actually doing something about it, both government, business, individuals, across the board, actually trying to work together.
Absolutely.
So I focused on COP26 after the elections, really as an indicator to see whether the global leaders would educate themselves before the meeting and then actually sign up to doing everything they could to actually trying to secure a future for us. And I continued working with my research to try and work out, as I said, how big the problem, just one of the big problems, which is the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is. So I found some figures and I plotted a graph basically of how many ppm we've increased in atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration.
What's
every
ppm?
year. That's parts per million.
Yeah, just I needed to know that in case you thought I was trying to be clever by getting him to explain to you, and you all knew he was explaining to me as well. Cheers.
Yeah, and I learned that since 1950 we've kind of been going up and getting steadily worse every year. On a trend line, it's been getting worse and worse every year. And I kind of summed it up by saying that so far we've made zero progress on net zero. And in fact, every year it's getting a little bit worse. And in the course of that research, I discovered that every ppm that we hear about is worth about 7.8 billion tonnes of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And for every, so let's call that 8 billion, for every 8 billion tonnes that we dump up into the atmosphere, another 4 billion dissolve into the sea.
Yeah.
And then the remainder gets absorbed by things growing on the land. So the IPCC released a scientific report probably 4 or 5 months ago, and that actually gave the real figures in there. So I managed to find the real figures from a bunch of proper scientists that said 46% of our emissions go into the atmosphere, 23% go into the ocean, and the remainder are used up by the land. And then by looking at the real-time carbon dioxide level in the atmosphere, which anyone can do if you look on climatelevels.org, and taking the number of ppm that have changed since this time last year, you can work out just by looking, how many billions of tonnes of CO2 we stuck in the atmosphere over the last year.
Yeah.
And this year we'll do about 47 billion tonnes of carbon dioxide. But that's a big number,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And so what I wanted to know was, if I took the best offshore wind turbine, how many of those would you need to actually take that carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere using the state-of-the-art direct air capture technology?
Yeah.
Which basically you suck air in, it goes into an amine, it absorbs the carbon dioxide in little pellets. You then take them out when they're full up of carbon dioxide, heat them up, catch the CO2 gas and put it in a gas bottle. That's basically what direct air capture is.
Yeah.
And I worked out that number, and it's about 875,000 of the biggest offshore wind turbines, the Halod X 12 megawatts.
Well.
And I thought, I think that's a number that people can understand is absolutely immense.
Yeah.
Because currently we've got 10,000 offshore wind turbines, and they're not all the big ones.
Yeah.
And Boris's great 10-point plan by 2030 intends to take us up to 30,000.
Yeah.
And we need 875,000 to get rid of just this year's emissions.
God.
And just
good luck, everyone.
And then you go, okay, well that's difficult. It's still a large number, 875,000. So you can also express it in terms of Hinkley C power stations. So that's the big one that they've taken 20 years to not quite finish building yet.
Yeah.
So you need about 2,050 of those just to take this year's CO2 emissions down from the atmosphere. This is nothing to do with converting to EVs or heat pumps or us getting to net zero.
Just say what EVs are. What are EVs?
Electric vehicles, so like electric cars.
Yeah.
So that was quite a big number, and I thought, well, okay, could we do that as humanity? If we all decided that was the most important thing to do, was to fix the insulator around the world. Well, if we want to survive, if we want to have a future.
Hands up. Anyone want to survive? Oh, Boris.
Hands up.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, we could probably do it if we all worked together around the world to do that, and realised it was a major problem.
Yeah.
So then I thought, okay, so what do you do with 50 or 47 billion tonnes of carbon dioxide when you've brought it down to the earth? And I've done some research on turning it into chalk, and that's a big number.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's really feasible to create a 50 billion tonne pile of chalk every year on the land and move it around in little lorries. So I don't think that's
exactly.
very
What would
feasible.
you do with it? What would be the byproduct? How would you use it? I mean, I'm sure
Yeah.
the calcium and everything, apart from you can use in various ways, but
Cement will be a reasonable start, but this is a big number, 50 billion.
oh yeah.
So then I thought, okay, did some research and joined some webinars with the oil industry, to basically try and find out what it would take to convert carbon dioxide into crude oil, into synthetic crude oil, which is a bit like synthetic fuel.
Yeah.
And there are techniques that are currently available industrially to do that. So you take the carbon dioxide from the air, and you split it in a process, and then you get hydrogen from water, and you split that in a process as well, and you join the hydrogen to the carbon using the industrial process, and you end up with crude oil. The objective then being that you can store excess, effectively, heat energy on the planet that we've got on the planet by converting it into renewable electricity, and then joining the hydrogen to the carbon, create the crude oil, and then stick it back down the oil wells where you got it from.
What, and sequester it back where it came from, essentially, all those billions of years.
Correct.
Wow.
That's right.
So reverse polarity.
So then you go,
Jesus,
okay,
that's incredible.
so how much energy would it require to take that 50 billion tons of carbon dioxide and convert it into crude oil, assuming you can then stick it back down an oil well? And the number is so big, when I looked at it, and I thought, this is not feasible. It's not possible to get that much renewable energy to put this stuff back where it came from. Even if you get over the insanity in our money world of doing that, if you just want to have a future, and you've got 50 billion tons a year of material that you can't do anything with, what are you going to do? So converting it back into crude oil has the benefit of using the heat energy effectively in the atmosphere and locking it up as carbon-hydrogen bonds. You use the excess of carbon dioxide, you take the carbon bit, use the excess of water, like sea levels rising, you use that as a hydrogen bit, and you put it back into a space that's already there, which is an old oil well. Too much energy required to do that.
Right.
So that's a really major problem. So I sort of finished working those things out, and it upset me because it means that I can't think of a way that we can actually have a future.
Right.
So the fundamental problem is there's too much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere.
Right.
And since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, we've actually put 2,400 billion tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. That's 2.4 teratons. And that's the big number behind the lady on the Sky Climate Show every night at 6:30, the one that goes, the number of millions of tons of carbon dioxide is a really long number. It's like 2.4 million tons, and that's 2.4 teratons, or 2,400 billion tons of carbon dioxide, which is what has caused the solar imbalance on the planet. And the problem is that we can't avoid that. We can't ignore it, because right now the poles are melting. So this is the fundamental thing. There's so much excess heat energy coming onto our planet that the poles are actually melting.
But it's also being maintained because it can't get out either, because it's a closed system.
That's right. That's the heat imbalance.
That's what people, and let's face it, we all know that I'm not a scientist, but I get it. And then I wonder if I get it, how come someone who went to Eton doesn't? Or maybe they're not focused.
That's right, their focus is on making money, and it's not on having a future.
Capitalism caused climate chaos.
And to be fair, we all focus, including me, on making money. I realise that my reason for wanting to make money is security. It's to get basic security. And I need that security because there's an underlying anxiety that you see in many of the people you help. They don't know what's caused it, but they know something is wrong. And I think climate crisis and ecological crisis and our disconnection from each other for the benefit of making money, our disconnection from the global south, the injustices that we do it because we make money, our disconnection from what we're doing to the planet by mining its resources, both mineral and agricultural. Over here in the first world, we're disconnected from the pain that caused because we're focused on making money. And we do that by going to work and being paid for work, and we call that a job. And our entire life is focused from the age of 2 on educating ourselves in order to get a job, in order to have enough money to feel secure, and in some cases to basically live, or to try and scrape a living out. So we've kind of become completely disconnected from what we're actually doing because we've got this focus on money. And the higher up you go, as we've seen recently in the scandals, not scandals, in the corruption discussions that we're having about the government.
And the local government, just so we're clear.
The higher up you go, the more focus there is on money.
Wiltshire Council.
And the entire system that we live in is headed by the term economic growth,
Yeah.
which is making money.
Of course, it's almost laughable if it wasn't just so like, guys, what do you actually think is going to happen? If you just keep your eye on the GDP every year, what do you actually think is going to happen? If you are, even they're talking about 3% growth, like, no, it's growth in the wrong direction. You have to maintain life. You have to be able to. There's certain aspects of the natural world that you cannot violate.
But
Principles.
We have violated. We now have to
100%.
repair.
So I mean, they are the basic laws of thermodynamics, aren't they? The first and second laws of thermodynamics. Think about that, everyone.
But if you look at the graph of global GDP growth,
Yeah.
and you put it next to the graph of CO2 level rise in the atmosphere, it's the same.
Yeah, that's it. And here's the interesting thing. So all those things that were secreted away by nature, not by mankind, before humanity really was a scourge of this planet, they were secreted like oils, like your fossils, all that sort of good stuff. And then during or accelerated the Industrial Revolution, we've basically been hoofing it out into the atmosphere. We didn't really understand, I guess, what was happening, but we were making all this stuff. The fires of the furnaces of industry were fired by gas and coal. And the people, like myself and my father and all people like that, who had to, I'll say myself, but working class people, worked in awful, ridiculous, disgraceful circumstances to get the coal out, or to get the black stuff, or the oil, or the gas, blah, 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 and made capitalists a system. It's like, oh yeah, we wasn't to feed everyone, it wasn't to make sure everyone was okay, it was to make stuff that wasn't necessary, and that's the problem. We made so much stuff that has been unnecessary. If it was to do with our survival, and if we really knew it, and it's not because working class people or the underclass or anyone basically that isn't really capitalising out of this don't get it, they're not taught it. Why? If we were taught it, if the true cost of everything we bought was really, so how much did it cost to make, but how much did it cost to the environment? How much is it going to cost us to try and rebalance that? So if you're going to make that, this is how much damage it's going to do to the environment. So eventually, there's no point making this because you can't enjoy it because you're dead, because you can't breathe, etc. So the idea I would use for that, so to put it into basic terms so even people like me can understand it, is this. If a plastic toy soldier, if its true cost of development, not just how much it cost the poor pay of whoever made it, but every other aspect of it, the true environmental cost to repair, it would be so expensive to have one, you wouldn't do it. And you wouldn't want to buy it, but you wouldn't probably want to buy it morally and ethically if you knew it had this other aspect. That it was, you can buy it, it's cheap, but it's going to potentially hinder your ability to allow your children, your grandchildren to survive. These are the stark realities of and everyone's thinking, oh well, they just don't want to be capitalists because they're jealous because all these people who are the elites, the oligarchs, and all these people that have this power, who perpetuate power because power begets power, energy begets energy, violence begets violence, which is is why I don't have a truck with violence. Activism. So you've got all this science that hasn't been because the nature of education, etc., hasn't quite obviously been dissipated amongst the masses, because any mother I know, any mother in the right mind, I'm using mothers, look at nature programs, look at the female scenario, look at what the power of a mother bear, etc., across the piece, lions, polar bears, you name it. A mother, a human mother as well, will do anything and everything in their power to protect and to provide for their children. If they were given, if women were just given the information, had been for years, because they've known, for instance, 1965 was the first major kind of research around a lot of this stuff. So they've known it for literally 56 years. I know that quite accurately because I'm actually born in 1965. It's not my fault, everyone. But you wouldn't do it. So actually, as part of the Sustainable Development module, the societal awareness of products would make it inviable. You just go, well, good luck with you, I ain't buying that. It's going to kill my kids.
It would.
So obviously that's hidden. So therefore the direct activism needs to take place for people to go, I don't get it. Why are these people doing this? Are they bored? Now, you're involved a little bit. You have been involved in stuff like that.
So
What was your motivator?
I took that, exactly what you've just said, and applied that to the 22,500 houses that Wiltshire Council want to build to double the size of Chippenham, along with a road.
Yeah.
And I basically ended up...
A town that hasn't got the amenities already. Bridge Centre. Nice one, Pete Hutton.
So I did a fair amount of statementing and questioning of Wiltshire Council in the cabinet meetings and the full council meetings.
Yes.
And basically ended up asking the question, will this council implement a policy of requesting any developer to do a budget that shows the financial cost and gain of building a housing estate like that, the carbon cost of building a housing estate like that, and the environmental cost of building an estate like that, mainly focused at the damage you do just by digging up the soil in preparing what is currently farmland to turn it into concrete and brick housing estate. And the answer to my point blank question at the end of a couple of years was no, we're not going to put in a policy to account for the amount of carbon that we're going to release. We're not going to put in a policy for the amount of environmental damage and death that we're going to cause. And that was kind of the result of what I would call sort of political activism, with kind of empowered by Extinction Rebellion, but actually talking as myself in cabinet meetings, in the process, in full council meetings. And more than happy to be supported and sometimes stand with the Extinction Rebellion people outside with the flags making noise and the various actions and activities that they do in London and also in Wiltshire and sometimes in Chippenham. So I'd finished working out my calculations about atmosphere probably 2 or 3 months ago, and I happened to be called along or invited to a talk by Roger Hallett over in Bath. And I'd come across him in sort of watching some YouTube stuff, and I think I read an article or two that he'd written. Went along, and I remember I was presented in his pitch for what Insulate Britain were doing. He basically outlined the state of the world as it is right now, which absolutely chimes with what I'd spent 2 years concluding myself. There was not a single thing that he said in his presentation of about 20 minutes on the state that the world is in right now that I didn't know or disagreed with. And I had all the numbers to understand what he was talking about, except when he said that none of the scientists at the Paris Accord COP believed that we could ever achieve 1.5 as a maximum amount of warming. So I didn't know that. And then he stood there and he said, well, you know, what can we do about it as people? And then he went on to explain some of the history of non-violent direct action. And non-violent direct action, particularly in the case where there are extreme issues, such as apartheid in Southern America.
Tell me about
And
I was massively active in this town.
In that time?
Oh, But totally, carry on, Oh, first protest march this town and a sit-in. Good luck, everyone at the council.
And so basically what Roger was saying was that Insulate Britain had formed because now was an absolutely critical time for the planet. The run-up to COP26 and COP26 itself are the times at which the world can choose, if it wants to take a different path away from money towards having a future. But it needs the leaders to actually lead and to actually call that change. And so the object of the exercise was to get a group of people, as many as could be found, to basically block the motorways, to cause as much financial damage to the government as possible, in order that it would listen to what the demand was, which was for our government to embrace the simplest step possible of fighting climate change in this particular country by insulating houses that require insulation.
Fairly fundamental and basic.
It is basic,
isn't it? It's so basic it's beautiful.
And then I didn't know that every year 10,000 people from, this is the government's own statistics, 10,000 people a year die because they're too cold in their house, because they can't afford to heat it, because they haven't got any insulation.
Go straight out into the air.
That's right. No, I didn't know that. So that was interesting. And if our government decides to embrace the insulation of all the houses in the country, you create a huge number of jobs for people that use their hands. They don't need to be super academic. There's a range of skills. There's all sorts of different ways of insulating stuff, and some of it's fairly cheap and some of it's very expensive.
But not as expensive as all dying because of...
Well,
I'll just keep that in your head, everyone.
If you care as a government about the people, which I think is their main objective, then
it's their written objective, in truth. You know, I can't remember.
What's going on,
I mean, regardless of any party politics has proven itself to be, just moribund and corrupt in every sense. Tony Blair, how he can show his face. Do you know what I mean? It's like, wow, you guys have got no... Seriously? Wow. You can show your face at the epitaph. It's like these Egypts here at the things like that you would put yourself standing in front of people that have died because they were told various, propaganda about why they should be fighting at certain points in history. And there he is, someone that is absolutely part of something that was quite obviously to do with money, oil, and murder. You can only call it murder. It's just like that. They have the
system
cheek.
That we live in.
Right. So when you say government, I think it's important to for me, always just to separate that into the actual Egypts and the individuals that are purporting to be representing anyone.
And I think
you look at them and go, bless you. You do really think that the clever people amongst us, think that you really have any care for, because why would you be taking away basic things like free school meals during the pandemic, or free school meals for poor people, excuse me, I've worked with so many of these kids, during the holidays and what have you.
Yeah.
Taking, oh my God, it goes on and on. So
yeah.
You cannot, so when people say government, I say name the people that you think the government are. Because if you're talking about the people that actually do the work, or the civil servants who know what's going on, potentially, they're not the people. The decision makers, well, Home Office, come on.
Yeah.
Priti Patel, she's proven to be a bully and everything else, defended by Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson in himself is a liar, a proven liar. These are just people that, for whatever reason, have been put in and coerced, no doubt, and for backhanders and all sorts of stuff, potentially, allegedly, into those situations so they can come out the other end, like David Cameron, with these massive, multi-million-pound advisory roles. It's sick. It's a thing now, but still, I would still rather we've come up with a new citizens' way on a local level. That's why I'm going to focus all my beauty and energy on Chippenham Town Council, on Chippenham as a place, but in respect to the other towns around us, some great initiatives happening to change fundamentally how local situations are. So that's the council is here, and at the county level, you ask them why they were putting these houses and why these property developers were building unnecessarily houses. Because here's the other bit about houses. We wouldn't have a housing shortage if there was a situation in this country where you couldn't own more than one house until everyone had one.
That's true. Yes, I think we wouldn't have a housing crisis if we hadn't invited 250,000 people a year into this country to work since 2005.
Yeah, but what do you mean? So you don't invite... You think the housing's...
Economic growth requires that the economy grows every year.
Yeah.
Productivity...
Which is absurd in itself. Forget it. Don't worry about it. Feed your kids, shelter them, go back to the basics. See how much it costs then. Not the same amount at all.
So the fundamental rule of parties of both colours is that economic growth is king. We have to grow the economy every year.
That's Keynesism. It's all those things.
Since 2005, productivity's been flat.
Yeah.
So if you want to grow the economy, you need more workers.
Oh, you need cheaper workers as well.
You need more workers.
Yeah.
So the best place to get the cheaper workers is from outside of the UK.
Yeah.
We've brought in 250,000, I call them work resources. I don't have a problem with the people coming in or with them coming in. But from a housing crisis point of view, we have invited 250,000 human work resources to come and live in this country, to work in the economy every year since 2005. Productivity has been flat since 2005, and we've done that because we tell ourselves we need economic growth. When you bring in 250,000 people a year, you don't have enough houses after a while, which is why we have to build
If you still go to the old paradigm, if you go, this is how we make houses. How many houses you got? Oh, I'm a property developer. Don't worry about it. We're gonna give you loads of prime land in Chippenham because it's got a railway and a thing. the actual equation, regardless of the 250,000 people a year, and of course, the more people that you have in a situation, the more resources you're going to need to expend. However, the net benefit of having immigrants, for want of a better word, or environment, economic immigrants, people who travel to this country to take those jobs, which bizarrely, the people in this country after generations saying, I ain't doing them anymore. Yeah, I'm not doing those jobs. You have to get more desperate people, whether it's in the army, air force, or navy. Look who died in the wars. It wasn't just British, white supremacists. It was the Irish, the Indians, etc., etc. So what I'm saying is, how many people do we have in this country, and how many people have a house? How many homeless people are there? Okay, great. Put that to one side. How many people in this country have got more resources than they need by physically having houses that they rent out, houses that they have on holiday down in Cornwall? We do a load of work in Cornwall. Most of the year in Cornwall, the reality is the weather isn't that good. It's better than most places, to be fair, but the weather isn't good, but the jobs aren't there because it's all about seasonal economics. If you think in those terms, if you don't think in those terms and you live within your means in a place, but you have to be able to afford the shelter. But you can't afford the shelter because David Cameron and his and their families have got second, third homes in these places. So having a principle about capitalism and ownership needs to be taken out. So you shouldn't be able to make money from education, from health, you shouldn't be able to make money from housing. People say, what about the housing? We used to have a thing called council houses, everyone. There's enough builders that build the appropriate amount of houses, and they need to be insulated, they need to be green in all those environmental sustainable ways. But none of those strictures and restrictions are put on them because it's all about fast buck.
Yes.
So,
which brings us back to the concept of system change. So
yeah.
Changing away from economic
Absolutely,
growth
yeah.
and towards having a future.
Yeah. Yeah, you got that one.
That's right.
That's great.
And
Away from economic growth to having a future. Wonder which one I would pick.
Interlake Britain's plan basically was to sit people on the motorway repeatedly until those people ended up in jail or on remand. Yeah. And the object of the exercise was to have a couple of hundred people on remand during COP26. Yeah. So that when our current political leaders stood up and said, we're very green, we're leading the world, these are all the things we're doing. Yeah. The idea was that you could actually point to the 200 or 300 people in jail and go, hang on a minute, they've just asked you to do the most straightforward, cost-effective,
basic thing,
people-helping thing to fix climate change in this country. Yeah. And you slung them in jail for it. Yeah. So it's very difficult to game the legal system or to game the system. There's a big set of very clever people behind government, military strategists, industrial strategists, very well paid, full time. And so the government decided, instead of using the laws that currently exist, which mean that if I sit on the motorway, get arrested, released the next day and told not to do it again by a magistrate, I then go and sit on the motorway the next day. When I get arrested, put in front of the magistrate, the law says that I should then be chucked in on remand to make sure I don't do it again. And if I come off remand after a week or two and go and do it again, then I either go on remand for a much longer period of time or I go directly to jail. But the government decided not to use that currently existing law, and they decided that they would use a limited company called Highways England to put an injunction first on the M25, such that if I'd sat on it and went and sat on it a second time, I would be liable for the court expenses and the loss of earnings of Highways England Limited for doing that. So not really a go to jail sort of problem, but more we'll take all your money off you sort of problem. And we'll put you in jail as well. And so instead of actually using the law that existed and stopping the Interlake Britain people from upsetting and disturbing the public by sitting on the road, they decided that they would try and extract cash from them. Put an injunction out on there and didn't put any of us on remand or in jail, which then freed us up to keep causing trouble and keep trying to get the government effectively to put us on remand. So it didn't work out the way that was planned, in that there wasn't 200 or 300 people in jail during COP, to highlight the fact that we're not the world leader in climate change activity at all in England. and we did cause a lot of disruption. But on the plus side, there was a lot of media attention about the fact that the government won't insulate or won't help to insulate the homes across Britain, which is the most basic step you can do to fight climate change in this country. So it was a very challenging. Actually, doing those actions at the time was extremely challenging, sort of mentally, emotionally. And it took me probably 2 or 3 months to argue in my head that this is something that I should do, given the gravity of the situation with the climate and the ecology. And that was really hard work as well, and also very emotional, just inside me. You know, that's like testing your mental strength and, you know, your mental stability, thinking about that for such a long time. And then in the run-up to doing each of those actions, and I did them 4 times, I found that I couldn't sleep the nights before, so that it was that level of stress that you had to kind of get over. And in order to bring yourself to the point where, or to bring myself to the point where I could set off and do that, I had to imagine what the future's going to be like. From the point when it hits home here, which is the day when there is no food in the supermarket.
Absolutely. This is the point of underlining these things. Food
So,
in the supermarket, so remember that, people.
So here in this country, it's not probably not forest fire, because we burnt all the forests already. It's not floods, because that's probably going to be 50 to 100 years away before that affects us much in this country.
But more and more...
Sea level floods, sorry.
Exactly. But more and more in the
for me,
overbuilt floodplains.
I see it, and we see it now. It's climate migration by people who simply
From
cannot
Sub-Saharan
exist.
Africa.
They can't
What did
exist
they would do?
where they were born, because we've taken
They
the
take all the
resources.
resources from it and made loads of money utilising their land not to grow their food. When you ask why these people are hungry, it's because capitalists have used their land to grow food and everything else.
And then
And not for them, for us to sell.
The climate changes,
chocolate, coffee.
and they can't grow food because there's not enough rain or there's too much sun. So I see the bad situation that's going to occur as millions and then tens of millions of people migrating towards
They're doing
Europe.
it. They're starting to do it now.
They're doing it in Mexico
And they get
already
1,000
as well.
people a day. So everyone out there that's listening to this, don't worry about them being... ask yourselves what you would do in a similar situation. If you wouldn't take your family out of harm's way to either dry land or safety, then I don't know how you're connected. So imagine how that looks like on a world scale, because there will be a time where people are literally, because of the bad and the misinformed or the distracted decision makers, making ideas based on profit as opposed to the people's safety and security. I'm going to have to call it a day here, because I've just been told I have to get out of here.
That's all right.
We can come back to this at any time, but I want to say thank you for taking that action, because people go, he made me late for getting to work to make these capitalists more money. In other words, to perpetuate us closer to our destruction. Think about what you were annoyed about, because you people, Insulate Britain would always let ambulances and stuff by, wouldn't you? Right. This is popular myth that people stop. If my kid was on the way, if your kid, I tell you where your kid's on the way to. Climate-induced destruction, death by capitalists causing climate chaos. So when you see an Insulate Britain person, you shake their hands on your behalf and say, wow, I didn't have the wherewithal or the knowledge to do it. I know what I would do if I thought that my family were threatened. And I'm talking in the perspective of my grandfather being at Gallipoli, the Somme, Passchendaele, deserted, then went and kicked the arses of the Black and Tans out of Limerick. So, good luck out there. You're a legend. Thank you very much. People, any questions, please get a hold of me or Adrian to find out what you need to know to fight the people that, for whatever reason, don't do the voodoo that they should do so well. Thank you, and see you later. Nice one, brother.
Thank you.
You're a G.
Spinning at 1,000 miles an hour, just another speck in the cosmic shower. All the universe held within the flowers. Messing with your head just to feel some